You saved $30,000. Let that sit for a second, because most people your age are spending $30,000 they haven't earned yet. And you did the opposite. You held the line when everyone around you was swiping. You said no to the trip, maybe twice. You made your lunch 4 days a week and pretended not to mind. You watched the number climb, slowly, then a little faster, until one morning you opened your banking app and there it was. $30,000. And for about 48 hours, it felt incredible. Then a quieter, more unsettling question moved in. Now what? I've thought about this a lot, not just theoretically. I remember the exact moment I crossed a savings threshold that felt significant to me. I was sitting in my car outside a Target at 8:42 in the morning, not because I needed anything, but because I didn't know where else to sit with the thought. I had the money, I just had no architecture for what came next. And that gap, that specific kind of confusion that looks like success from the outside, is exactly what most financial content refuses to address honestly. So that's what we're doing today. If this kind of conversation is what you've been looking for, the kind where we don't sugarcoat the mechanics and we don't sell you a course afterward, consider subscribing to the channel. My name is John. I'm not a licensed financial advisor. What I am is someone who's made enough decisions with real money to know which mistakes cost you years, not just dollars. Hit the like button if that sounds useful. Let's get into it. Here's the first thing nobody tells you about reaching $30,000. The number itself is not the achievement. The behavior that produced the number is. And the reason this matters is brutal. Most people who save $30,000 will watch it dissolve within 24 months if they don't understand the difference between capital that is resting and capital that is rotting. Money sitting still is not neutral. It is losing. Right now, with inflation running the way it has through 2025 and into 2026, every month that $30,000 sits in a standard savings account is a month you are quietly donating purchasing power to a system that was never designed to reward the patient. The average high-yield savings account is offering somewhere between 4.5% and 5.2% annually as of early 2026. That sounds decent until you realize the IRS considers that interest ordinary income, taxable at your marginal rate, which means your real yield, after tax, after actual inflation, is often closer to flat. You're not growing. You're treading water with the appearance of swimming. And there's something even more uncomfortable waiting underneath that. But we're not ready for it yet. Let's talk about what $30,000 actually is, because most people think about it wrong. They think of it as a destination. I'll feel secure when I hit $30,000. And then they hit it, and the security lasts exactly as long as it takes for life to remind them that security is not a static number. What $30,000 actually is, in the architecture of personal finance, is the first real decision point. Before this number, your primary job was survival and accumulation. Keep expenses below income. Build the buffer. Don't make catastrophic mistakes. At $30,000, the game shifts. Not dramatically, not overnight, but structurally. You now have enough capital that how you deploy it matters more than how hard you work in any given month. That's a different kind of power than most students have ever held. And most students have no idea what to do with it. Here's what the default playbook looks like. You keep the $30,000 in savings because it feels safe. A few months pass. Maybe you read something about investing. Maybe you download an app. Maybe you put $500 into something and it drops 12% in a week, and you immediately move it back to savings and tell yourself you'll wait for a better time. The better time does not come. Or rather, it comes constantly, every single week, and you keep waiting for the version of it that feels obvious. That version does not exist. I know because I waited for it. For almost 2 years, I held cash at the exact moment in my life when time was the most valuable thing I had. And the cost of those 2 years, not in dollars I lost, but in compounding I never started, is something I still feel. Not dramatically, just quietly when I run the numbers. So let's build the actual framework. And I want to be precise about this because $30,000 has specific structural demands that $5,000 doesn't have, and $300,000 has already moved past. This is a number with very particular leverage if you treat it correctly. The first layer is what I call the foundation layer. And before you do anything else with this money, you need to know exactly how much of it is yours to move. Not all $30,000 is investment capital. Some of it is already spoken for. 3 to 6 months of genuine living expenses needs to be ring-fenced and untouchable. Not because financial influencers told you to, because without it, every market dip becomes a personal emergency, and you sell at exactly the wrong moment. Every single time. This is not a theory. Research published in the Journal of Behavioral Finance documented a consistent pattern across retail investors during volatility events. The ones who liquidated at losses were overwhelmingly the ones who had no liquidity buffer outside their investment accounts. The emergency fund isn't conservative. It's the thing that lets you be aggressive with everything else. So let's say your real living expenses, monthly, are $2,200. That means 3 months is $6,600. And 6 months is $13,200. If you want to be surgical, you land somewhere in that range, and you park it in the highest yield FDIC-insured vehicle available to you right now. Marcus by Goldman Sachs, SoFi, Ally. They're not exciting. That's the point. The excitement belongs somewhere else in your allocation. Now, after the foundation is set, you have somewhere between $16,800 and $23,400 left. This is the capital that actually gets to work. And here is where most students make the mistake that quietly costs them a decade. They treat that remaining capital as one pool. It isn't. It's 3 different instruments with 3 different jobs. And if you mix them up, you get the worst of all 3. The first instrument is your tax-advantaged account. If you have earned income, and a lot of students do, even part-time, you are eligible to contribute to a Roth IRA. In 2026, the contribution limit is $7,000 if you're under 50. This is not optional optimization. This is the most structurally powerful move available to someone your age. Here's why. Money inside a Roth IRA grows tax-free. Not tax-deferred, tax-free. Every dollar of capital gains, every dividend, every split, every compounding cycle inside that account is invisible to the IRS upon qualified withdrawal. For someone who is 22 years old and putting $7,000 into a Roth IRA today, the math is almost surreal. At an average annualized return of 9%, which is below the S&P 500's historical average, that $7,000 becomes approximately $226,000 by age 62. One contribution, 1 year. $226,000, untaxed. The system was not built for people who know this. It was built for people who didn't. I can already hear the objection forming. John, I can't lock money up until I'm 59 and a half. And I hear you. Genuinely. The Roth IRA has one feature that most people never mention. Your contributions, not your gains, your contributions, can be withdrawn at any time, penalty-free. So it's not a vault. It's more like a vault with a specific door. Your principal is accessible, your growth is protected. That distinction matters more than almost anything else I'll say today. After the Roth is funded, we move to the second instrument, the taxable brokerage account. This is your more liquid, more flexible vehicle. And the question here is not, should I invest this? The question is, what do I invest it in? And what is my actual time horizon? Because those 2 answers determine everything. If your time horizon is less than 3 years, and this money might be needed for rent, grad school, a down payment, then equity-heavy positions are not appropriate here. This is where I-bonds, short-term treasury bills through treasurydirect.gov, or even a high-yield cash management account makes more sense. The market doesn't care about your 3-year plan. It never has. If your time horizon is 5 years or longer, and this is capital you genuinely will not need in the near term, then the allocation conversation shifts. For most students, the cleanest answer is not glamorous. VOO, VTI. Maybe a small allocation to an international developed market fund like VXUS. That's it. Not because it's the only approach, but because for someone in their early to mid-20s with no professional money management background, broad index exposure gives you the diversification, the low expense ratio, and the statistical probability of market rate returns without requiring you to be right about any individual company, sector, or macro call. You are not smarter than the market. Neither am I. The people who have accepted that and invested accordingly have done better than the vast majority of people who tried to prove otherwise. Here's something I want to say directly. There's a version of this conversation that usually comes next, where the narrator starts talking about individual stock picking, options, crypto exposure, alternative assets. I'm not going to do that. Not because those things don't exist, but because I've watched too many people my age, people with real discipline, real saved capital, walk into that space without the framework to navigate it and walk out with $30,000 that became $11,000 in 18 months. The cost wasn't just the money. It was the years. It was the starting over. It was the quiet, corrosive feeling of having been disciplined and then watching that discipline get erased by a decision made in confidence. The market has a specific punishment for premature sophistication, and it is calibrated. Now, we have the foundation funded. We have the Roth IRA maxed at $7,000. We have the taxable brokerage account positioned with broad index exposure. And there is still one more layer, the one that most financial content at your level completely ignores. And honestly, it's the one that separates the people who build real capital from the ones who plateau. The third instrument is what I'd call the skill capital account. This is not a financial account. It is a deliberate, budgeted allocation of capital toward the specific capabilities that will increase your earning capacity over the next 5 years. And this matters at $30,000 in a way that it stops mattering at $300,000. At $300,000, your capital generates enough yield to compound meaningfully on its own. At $30,000, your most powerful financial lever is still you. The trajectory of your income over the next 5 to 10 years will have a larger impact on your net worth than any single investment decision you make today. Let that breathe for a second. A 2022 study from the Georgetown Center on Education and the Workforce found that the wage gap between individuals who strategically develop in-demand skills versus those who rely on their baseline credentials widens at an accelerating rate between ages 22 and 35. This is the window. Not because it closes, but because the compounding that starts here is the kind that doesn't show up in a brokerage statement. It shows up in what you're able to negotiate, what rooms you're able to enter, what options become available. I'm not saying spend your investment capital on courses. I'm saying allocate intentionally. Maybe it's $500 a year toward a certification that is directly monetizable in your field. Maybe it's the cost of a specific professional network membership that gives you access to a different quality of conversation. Maybe it's the book on tax strategy that an accountant friend told you nobody reads, but that changes how you think about your next 5 IRS filings. The point is this: the people who build significant net worth in their 30s almost never did it by finding the perfect ETF at 22. They did it by dramatically increasing what they earned between 22 and 32, while keeping a disciplined investment structure underneath that growth. The index funds do their job quietly. Your income is the engine. Both matter. Neither one alone is the answer. There is something I want to say before we get to the part of this conversation that I think is actually the most important. And I want to say it carefully. If you are watching this and the $30,000 feels far away, if you're at $4,000 or $400, or you're still in the negative and the number this video talks about feels like someone else's reality, I need you to hear this. You are not behind. That feeling of being behind is not a fact. It is the product of a system that profits from you believing you are always one step short of where you should be. The financial industry, the advertising industry, the social media algorithm all share one common business model: make you feel inadequate. So you make decisions from that feeling. Decisions made from inadequacy rarely build wealth. They build the appearance of wealth for other people who are selling you something. The person who saves their first $1,000 with intention is playing a more sophisticated game than the person who earns $150,000 and has nothing left at the end of the month. Income is not the variable. Intention is. And you already have that. You proved it by being here. Now, the piece we've been building toward. The one I mentioned would require everything else to be in place first, before it could actually land. Here it is. The most important financial decision you will make in the next 12 months is not where you put your money. It is what you do with your attention. Specifically, how you relate to information about your money. Here's what I mean. When you first start investing, the natural impulse is to watch it closely. Check the app, refresh the portfolio, read every market analysis you can find. And I understand that impulse completely. I once refreshed my brokerage account 11 times in a single afternoon because it had dropped 4%, and I didn't know if that was normal or the beginning of something worse. It was normal. But here's what that behavior actually does. Research led by Brad Barber and Terrence O'Dean, published in the Journal of Finance, showed that investors who traded more frequently earned significantly lower returns than those who traded less. Not because frequent traders were less intelligent, because the act of watching closely created the psychological conditions for reactive decisions. Every time you open the app and see red, your nervous system registers a threat. And your nervous system is very old. It doesn't know the difference between a market correction and a bear running at you. It responds the same way. Get out. Get safe. Do something. The people who built wealth in index funds did it by creating distance between themselves and the daily noise of their portfolio. Not by ignoring it, by structuring their relationship with it. Quarterly check-ins, annual rebalancing, automatic contributions that don't require a decision every month. The discipline is not in choosing the right fund. The discipline is in not touching the right fund when everything in your nervous system tells you to act. There's one more thing, and it loops back to where we started. That morning. The one where you opened the app and saw $30,000 for the first time. And for 48 hours, it felt incredible. And then the question came, now what? I want to offer you a reframe on that moment. The question isn't really, what do I do with this money? The question is, who am I becoming as I decide? Because here is what I've observed, not in theory, but in watching people across different financial starting points. The ones who treated $30,000 as a finish line eventually found themselves back at a different starting line. The ones who treated $30,000 as the first proof of a system started compounding in ways that had nothing to do with market returns. They compounded confidence. They compounded decision-making. They compounded the quiet certainty that they were capable of delayed gratification at a level most people around them were not. That certainty is not a feeling. It is infrastructure. And it is the thing that carries you through the moments when the portfolio is red for 3 months straight and every voice in your feed is telling you the world is ending. You've already done the hard thing once. You saved $30,000 when the world was trying to get you to spend it. The next chapter is just an extension of that same decision, applied to a larger arena. If this video gave you something real today, drop the word compound in the comments. Not as a gesture, as a commitment. Every person who types that word is choosing to see this money not as a destination they arrived at, but as the beginning of a system they are building. That distinction is the entire game. And the people who understand it at 22 or 25 or even 28 are the people who look back at 40 and understand that the most valuable thing they ever compounded wasn't in a brokerage account. It was the habit of thinking clearly about money when everyone around them was being told not to. If you want more conversations like this one, subscribe to the channel. Every video is built the same way. No courses being sold on the back end, no agenda except clarity. New videos every week. And I'll see you in the next one.